Okay, so we've got a light and we've got a microphone, and I feel a little bit like I'm being interrogated, but I thought this might be a good time to talk about the Women's Place meeting yesterday, so that's what I'm going to do. So, first of all, I went to London yesterday to the House of Lords to a Women's Place meeting, and I'd received the invitation, and I went down and I had lunch with Lois Mooney and Rachel, which was absolutely just lovely in of itself, but I felt it was really important to take Rachel to see the Women's Place meeting because she hadn't been able to attend the one in Todmorden. And mostly what this situation is about women asserting themselves and kind of correcting a complete disregard for the rule of law around women. It's about academia, who are blind to us, and about what they have fostered to maintain that. And I think largely we're talking about a parasitic dynamic. So narcissistic activists kind of said that because they identified as women that they could, threaten women's freedom of assembly, behaved abusively, took women's resources. Women kind of said no. And that's a really, really important thing that's happened. Now, one of the problems is when you're in a period of significant flux, which we're in a very, very significant period of flux right now, we normalise things. And we make them normal to ourselves so that we can navigate the day-to-day and get through that flux, and then every so often we see how the ground has changed. And I think yesterday was an important turning point in terms of the landscape has changed quite significantly. And in other ways it remains the same and will remain the same. And I wanted to talk about that. So the first speaker was Kathleen Stock, and she has published the full unabridged version of what she said. And I think what Kathleen is saying is very interesting, because I was already aware. One of the first lectures that I got at the LSE was about roles, and I was aware about the role of philosophy and the role of kind of academia in upholding this. And I knew about all the bullshit studies, disciplines, the trans studies, queer studies, gender studies, degrees in mansplaining. I knew about all those vacuous disciplines, and I, having attended one of those institutions, at a point in time just as higher education was about to change quite significantly, I got to see that kind of academic structure just at the point where elite social closure, which is just, posh people and stuff, has kind of ended up with, it's corroded our higher education system. And what British women have done is they've stood up and they've said, no, actually you're required to be aware of the rule of law. And they have done that, and that has been done. And this has caused a war in higher education, and I think it's worth paying a little bit of attention to the structures in which Kathleen exists, and with the structures of elite institutions and the hierarchies within these institutions that have developed that mean that, the academics that I've been using to keep an eye on the systems that I'm talking about, they're very much on the margins. That, Susan Moore and Jane Lewis and Mary Daly have been plugging the same drum for years and years and years. And they're on the margins. And at the centre are these very male disciplines that are essentially bunk, which is our theoretical economics, our political science, and these disciplines. And we're in the tension between the two. And we have to, because of Brexit, change the way that we think about systems. We have to know how they work. And this is part of a much wider crisis. And I think what Kathleen Stock was speaking, what she said attested to, was the seriousness of the situation that academics now face, and the battle that's going to exist. And it's important to understand that that's going to take a while. And so we've still got policy coming out that's blind to this for quite a while. But that has been done. And then the next speaker that I wanted to mention was from the Dominican Republic. And she was a woman where they don't have same-sex protections, and where and that was the realisation that we're in the middle of something global, and we're breaking something global, and we're doing so by women standing up, and this is really important. And then the other speaker that I thought was, I can't remember her name, I'll write it under the video, I'm sorry, I didn't take notes or anything, but she was talking about law. And one of the things that was happening in about 2009, 2010 politically, is that we were saying we had reached a point where we had to synthesize all these legal frameworks. They were calling it gender mainstreaming, which was bollocks. I've got to be honest, it was bollocks. But largely what we were realising was we had to synthesise, we had to learn to understand how our safeguarding and equality legislations and other disciplines and institutions and how they all work together, and review this, gender mainstreaming. And instead we had austerity, which exploited inequality and kind of was an abusive reflex which targeted women because we had never done this. I mean, really it was quite simple that we had never done this, and we have now reached a point 8 years later where this self-ID crisis and a whole bunch of other problems have again opened up the fact that we don't know how these legal frameworks align. We have never done this. And so what's going to happen now is crisis in our welfare system, crisis in our local authorities, plus the self-ID crisis, plus the changed landscape where women have stood up and realised that this is the rule of law, and the rule of law is upheld by people. You know, that safeguarding is a partnership, that these laws are held up by people and that we have to assert them, that we have these laws, these shifts have already occurred, all these shifts have happened. But in order for law to be meaningful, women have to demand that it's applied. And we found out how very effective that is. Now, because largely we're not talking about laws that haven't been passed, we're talking about laws that have been passed but not considered. This is the process that this self-ID crisis has brought us up to, which is a point in time where we're sat in the House of Lords discussing that academic disciplines can't see this stuff. We've never done this. And the final kind of issue is politics. Now, it's important to understand that with any movement, existing power relations will reproduce. So academia will form, you know. That will happen there. And within politics, you know, a lot of the elite women who kind of have been part of the political cultures that have sold austerity in the last 8 years are now having to correct their understanding of these institutions. And it's messy. And it's going to keep getting messy. And this process has only just begun. So we have provided this catalyst for this to occur, but most of these shifts are about laws that are actually well established. And actually what's going to happen now, which is the same thing, which is that the same women that were invisible because, you know, I don't know whether it's cause and effect, the invisibility of these women means that we don't discuss these laws and we don't discuss these systems. That now leaves the way to start to challenge that, but that's going to be a long process. And one of the other things that was, you know, this was a meeting where there were lots of groups represented. It wasn't just a Women's Place UK meeting. There were also people from We Need to Talk. There were, on Friday, there was Transgender Trend. There were lots and lots and lots and lots of different groups who stood up. And what was abundantly, you know, clear in the room is that what's also happened, as well as women finding out what unites us, we've also found out what divides us and what, you know, differences are irreconcilable. And what's really important in that process is that that's healthy, it's organic, it's happened. But it basically changes the structure of things slightly, because it means that people have had to bypass the structures that are traditionally seen as conduits to change. So, you know, for quite a long time, The Guardian and the trade unions and, you know, they have all been seen as kind of a means to change, but actually they have been impacted by this process because we've all had to bypass them. And this blind spot that's shared in academia, that's shared to this rule of law, is very much shared in Westminster. And it's very much shared in our trade unions, and it's very much shared in all our political parties. And essentially Westminster found a version of womanhood that they liked, and it was abusive men. And now they are going to have that corrected. So I felt like, I very rarely feel like this. I'm in this room, and these problems that kind of are very complex and deep-rooted are all of a sudden being discussed in a wanna in a room in the House of Lords. And that was a really odd thing. And it was a really immense thing. And I was really proud to be sat there. And I was really, really proud that, you know, Rachel will remember that, you know, her 12th birthday was that. And so I came away kind of thoughtful a little bit. And now it's about looking at how the landscape has changed and how it's the same. And all of a sudden, kind of the earthquake that would have had to happen, you know, when I finished my dissertation, I was heartbroken, because I just looked at it, I thought, well, you can identify that reflex, you can identify that blind spot, but unless this crisis happens organically, and by organically I mean it has to happen on its own, people have to stand up on their own, unless women do that, then what you're actually talking about is how easy these systems fall away. And for me, it's always been, am I watching these systems fall away, or am I watching them being renewed? And all signs were to me, structurally, that they're going to be renewed, and that we're going through this process where we have eroded institutions in an attempt to roll back the welfare state. And all we've done is expose the rule of law and the things that we can't abdicate. And for the first time, I came away thinking, actually, this process is actually going on as it is. You know, the power dynamics and the differences between women hasn't gone away. All the differences between us have not gone away. But I think yesterday was really important, and I think the last few months have been really important. And I was really pleased. And one of the people that I made sure I introduced Rachel to was Ruth Sawatka. And she was introduced to her as the woman who made sure that Obin came to the top of it. And I felt it was important to do that. So that's kind of my musings about the Women's Place UK meeting yesterday. I'm probably going to do that law playlist. I've got some stuff going on, but I'll get that done this week.